Hi everyone, it's Peter Britt here from Cowboy and the Viking with episode 2 of the Cowboy and the Viking show. And just as we told you in the teaser, and hopefully you watched that, we've got a little bit to talk about in the show about one of the secrets in the music business. And as I told you in the teaser, maybe it's not a secret for everyone, but it's something you might find really interesting. We're going to talk about that. But before we get to that tonight, we have a very special guest on the show tonight. And I'm going to introduce him to you in just a minute, and you're going to hear some really interesting things, so we'll be right back. Hi everyone, you're back on the Cowboy and the Viking. And I told you we have a very special guest tonight, and we do. Right here in the studio, we have Eddie Lee Nelson, Willie Nelson's son. Eddie, thanks very much for being on the show tonight. We're glad to have you here.
Yeah.
Wanted to talk to you a little bit about some things that you've been talking about, the fact that you are Willie Nelson's son. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
My mom's Gracie Lee. I was born in San Angelo, Texas. It's a little town about 3 hours. It'd be considered east of Mexico, the Mexican border. My mother's a Cherokee Lakota Sioux maiden, and my dad's Willie Nelson. My mom had moved to San Angelo, Texas around 58 or 59, and Daddy playing shows down there met her. But the reality is the Lees and the Nelsons are related. And I've taken my mama's last name for my middle name, and my dad's for my last name. And but via the Lees and the Nelsons, Daddy had heard about a beautiful Indian girl, which is actually his 6th or 7th cousin, which I think that's pretty much all right. I wouldn't call anybody related to me that was that far off really related, but it is a way to identify someone. But, you know, I mean, they fell hard and fast in love. And so Daddy started coming into San Angelo a lot. And at that point, he hadn't moved to Austin, where he's famous for in today's era and for the last 40 years. But, you know, I mean, he's spattering around Texas where he was playing shows. He'd been to Tennessee. He'd been pretty much out to the West Coast. Pretty much played music about anywhere there was a venue already at that time in his career. But, you know, I mean, they hit it off, and it was real. My dad, I mean, it's publicized. He really, I don't think he's ever seen a wedding band that ever held him down. Anyways, but they had something very true and very real. And before I was conceived, they had dated over 2.5 years. Anyways, so if that answers the question, I mean, at this point I ramble on, so I forget the dang question. So if we got to go back again, let's do.
Well, we will if we have to, but okay. Just wanted to give you the opportunity just to tell a little bit about it. All right, I do have another question for you, Eddie. Let me ask you, when did you find out that Willie Nelson was your father, and how did you find out?
Well, there's been lots of twists and turns on that. I mean, I've always remembered him from when I was little. I went to live with a step family at 2.5 years old, but we still lived in San Angelo, Texas, and I was near my mom till I was almost 3.5, and Daddy was always in. And I mean, Daddy came in a lot. And I mean, some people say, oh, you're so little, you can't remember that. But yeah, I mean, yes, I can. And so, but in 82, in 81, I came back from Nashville. I'd been doing my own music thing, been playing a lot, and my stepdad had a heart attack, and I was living in the Chattanooga area of Tennessee, and I had a stepsister call me and said that if you want to see Dale alive, you got to come on in. So I left I had a lot of music. Between gospel music and country music and the bands I was playing with, had a lot of Tennessee and Nashville activity at that time. So I came home to be near my stepdad. Well, shit, he didn't die. So then, behind leaving Abilene area, I went up to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And while I was in Dallas-Fort Worth, I wrote a song, and it was called Prodigal Son. And in the song, the description, now at this time when I say step aunt, step family, at this point in my life, I just think they're aunts, family, whatever. I don't know the truth of my identity. My step family never supported, never let me know Willie was my daddy. Nor did they let me know Gracie Lee, who I saw intermittently, was my mother. And whatever was odd about that, well, it just happens. So in '82, my stepdad had moved on and died, and so my dad got a hold of me. And how that happened, I wrote this song, Prodigal Son, and my step aunt said, you have a daddy. That song is about your life and you just don't know it. And I said, no, my dad's sitting there in the cemetery. And she said, no, you don't even know who you are. And she said, I can call him. I can call him right now, and he'll probably call me within a couple of hours. So, I mean, I learned a long time ago, you don't argue with a woman bound and determined to do something. You just let them do their dang thing. So, anyways, the phone rang, and she said, it's your dad. And she hasn't identified him whatsoever. And I pick up the phone, and Daddy goes, you know who this is? And I said, well, I got an idea, but tell me who you are. And he said something else, and my response was, there's not but two of us that talk this way in America, which at that point was my complete world, America. And I'd been into Mexico, but never went on cruises with anybody when they wanted to. So anyways, that's my world. And I said, he said, well, who's the other one? I said, well, me and Willie Nelson, we sound like this, but outside of that, that's the beginning and end of that. And he said, yeah, but do you know who I am? And I said, well, are you Willie Nelson? And he said, yes, but do you know who I am? And then he come up with a line, I'm 21 years old and I've used this line. Well, kind of like that. I always said, who's your daddy? But he said, I'm your daddy. And I just busted out laughing. I was like, I said, well, it don't matter if you are or you aren't, but you're Willie Nelson, how the hell you doing? And that's how we started. And he said, that was on a Thursday, and he said, I can come in and I can come see you Saturday. Would you be at the house? And I said, well, yeah, but he was coming to my aunt's house. Okay, that's what. And I said, yeah. And because my step aunt had already told me, she said, he's going to come here. He'll come right here to see you. So anyway, he met us over there, and that's when he started kind of like unwrapping it. But, you know, Daddy has forever said that he only smokes. That's his only form of medication he uses. He smokes. Well, that has never been the truth. And so he would just be so messed up. And again, I mean, it was special to me. He would say, you're my boy, I love you. You're my son, I love you. But he wouldn't give me any facts. And he always said, we're going to go down to San Angelo and meet your mom. Well, that's where my mom's from, but that's also where my step family was from. So I was thinking he was telling me my stepmom and him had an affair or something. And so anyways, I spent the whole weekend, well, Saturday and Sunday. He left out it was dark when he left Sunday. And all we did mostly was just play music. And I've got a song, it's called Snow Covered Mountain. And he would always, I spent the whole summer with him. And he'd always say, sing me that mountain song about every hour on hour. Sing me that mountain song. And since then I've rewritten it, and it's a little bit modified from that era. But no, I spent the time with him, and he wanted me up on stage with him and Waylon, and I went to one of the shows. And at that point, I done had 3 major offers out of Nashville, and I'm playing my own shows already and have been for years. Now I'm back in Dallas, and I'm really not pursuing it. I'm just always play every day. I write music all the time, but I'm not doing the career thing with it. And so, anyways, I'm a star in my own right. I've done had Conway Twitty. When George Strait was making $287,000 a year, 3% of his annuities or his royalties, Conway Twitty told me what George made and said, I'll give you 387 and 17% of yours. Well, I've been turning down offers forever because I just don't want somebody pointing and telling me what to do. I can make it all right just doing my own thing. And so anyways, Daddy's saying, you know, when they stuck me up there on stage with him and Waylon and stuck me over here in a corner on stage, outdoor event, and I was so mad the whole time that I was just trying not to act mad because that's not where I belong nor where I've ever been. And I'm not doing this for me. I mean, I know 20 artists as big as Willie Nelson at that time. So, but I'm just being nice. He's such a nice guy. And my stepfamily is totally telling me that no, he's not your daddy, but you're talented and he's looking for his boy, and that's what's going on. Well, it come to the end of the summer where I absolutely walked out on my own dad because of my stepfamily lying to me. And I told him when I walked out my own back door there in Dallas, and him sitting on the couch, and he was just pressing it, what he was doing for me. He's trying to give me money and trying to give everything. And I wasn't taking nothing because he's not my dad. Well, he is, but I didn't know it. I'm a good guy, you know. And anyway, so I walked out my own door in my home, out the sliding glass door on the back porch, and I said, Willie, I'm not your boy, and I'm not going to let you do this. You got to find your boy. You got to find your boy. And my daddy was crying on the couch and saying, you're my boy, I love you. And I said, no, Willie, I'm not. You got me mistaken. See, I'm believing my stepfamily. And anyways, he said, if you won't be my son, can I treat you like my best friend? And I said, well, we are that good of friends, but you got to find your boy. And I left my back porch right before 3 o'clock. I come back to my house at a little bit after 6, his car is still parked there. I come a little bit after 8, his car is still parked there. I come a little bit after 9, his car is still parked there. I came at after 11, he's still there. I came after midnight. Well, I went ahead and went to a club. I came in after the club, after 2 o'clock, and he was gone. And I wouldn't take no more calls from him because I wanted him to find his boy. And I'd been told I wasn't. And again, my dad, he still does today, his entire life. It's a complete lie when he says all he does is smoke. That's a total lie. I've been with my family in the last 5 years. I know the truth. It's a complete lie. He dopes. When you dope that hard, you don't make sense. He could sing, he could play, we could sing, we could play. He never gave me one statement other than I love you. But if I'm taking that statement relative to thinking he's deceived who I am, it doesn't carry the same weight. I cared for Willie Nelson. I've never told 3 people outside of those who knew about it at that time in my entire life. In 2009, or it might have been just into 2010, I went to record a CD. And I was performing as Skinny Cowboy. When they played my CD back, see, I've been on this side of the PA. I'm not hearing how my voice really sounds. And again, I'm not considering my voice sounds like Willie Nelson or anyone else. And they played my entire CD back, and it sounded like a Willie Nelson album. And I said, I don't know why y'all did that, but put it back to my voice. And the studio, the engineer and the owner, they look at me like that surprised look. They said, we haven't touched you. We digital, we do this and that. We recorded you analog like you asked. That's your voice. And I said, it damn sure is not. Now fix it. And they said, there's nothing to fix. And they said, has anybody ever told you you sound like another country singer? And I said, well, I can listen to that, and y'all made me sound like Willie Nelson. They said, we didn't. And they showed me there on the screen how when you adjust, and they said, this is just you, all the little, on the big computer screen, all the little, like heartbeat things going up and down. And I said, well, I'm not going to let the CD out like that. I said, I can constrict my vocal cords and sing different. Well, I never released that CD because it sounded horrible. Because I was trying to do like this other voice so it wouldn't sound like Willie. And of course I don't know then, he's my dad. So again, I done forgot the dang question, but...
Well, that's all right, that's all right. You told us an interesting story there you've experienced in your life, and that's great. But I have another question for you, following what you said. When you were at the point where you did not believe you were Willie Nelson's son, what caused you, or how did you make the transition from there to knowing that you are?
Again, there's always a story connected to story, and without the first story, you really can't start at the second one. You could, but it'd be boring. Okay. Anyways, that's my sentiments on that. Anyways, I'd had a major injury back in 2005. I mean, I spent a year and a half, 3 times they told me, doctors told me, we're not making the next appointment because you're going to be dead. I got from 194 pounds to under 110. Major injury. Nerve damage and lots of stuff wrong. Anyways, I went to recovering, and I had absolutely lost a few million in property and in things I'd attained in the world. Lost my health, lost every damn thing. And just to bring it on home, I had all that nerve damage, and I couldn't play a guitar for even 20 minutes, and my arms would start spasming, and it'd literally throw my arms off the guitar strings. And I had been making a good part of my living as a sculptor. And I'd been already, as a sculptor, I would throw the art. Now what I was doing was replicating rodeo stars, different photographs they had that I'd carve them in clay. I mean, I'm a very good sculptor, but I would be successful on some, and then at whatever point on another one, I'd have a spasm, and I'd throw that piece of clay plumb across the room because I just have a spasm. I broke them, and I'd come up with a design that if I would lay that wood here and how I braced everything, it cut off my nerve function, and then if I had that spasm, it would only travel so far, and it stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And I was successfully carving clay. Well, I couldn't play the guitar. I've sang all my life, okay? Played the guitar all my life. And finally, 3 years into it, I spent 10 days, that in 10 days, I could either keep my fingers on the strings without a nervous reaction to throw my hand off for 40 minutes to even an hour and 10 minutes. After 10 days of that, it was July 3rd, and then I said, you know what? I've lost everything. I've had offers all my life in country music. Country music is radio. Country music, I can sit on a stool and nobody will complain because I have the voice. I mean, it's just what I'm telling myself. And I said, I'm going back into music.
Well, we're back. We had to take a little break, but once again, we are here with Eddie Lee Nelson, son of Willie Nelson. And we were just talking a few minutes ago about how Eddie met his father, how he found out that Willie Nelson was his father, and who he found out from. And Eddie was telling us about an incident where Willie had come to his house And you want to take it back
Yeah,
from there?
yeah. I mean, I know we discussed this earlier, it's on the tape. But what it came down to is due to my step family influence, I never accepted Willie actually was my dad. So I walked out of his world, walked out my own back door, and just refused to talk to him on the phone. I wanted him to find his son. I was convinced I was not. And I walked out of his life. And he did try to find me many times throughout the years. And people did find me. But the internet and all this and people being as techy and how the society works today in those years, I would just see to it they didn't know how to find me, and that's where, because I just wasn't going through that again. I respected my dad, didn't know he was my dad, I respected him as a man, as an artist, and I just wasn't going to have this go on again because I was convinced he's not my dad. So
yeah, that's where we left off before,
Yeah.
pretty much, is you had been telling us this part of your memories.
yeah,
And I asked you how you made the transition from not believing he was your father
okay.
to really understanding that he was.
Okay, July 4th, 2010. When we were talking about the injury, I think we were right here, but I'll just repeat and we can clip and whatever. But July 4th, 2010, after having an injury that had almost killed me for 3 years, I'd come to the point where my nerve damage had healed enough. I could keep my hand on a guitar string for 40 minutes to over an hour. July 3rd, I went and sold a show sponsored by Tractor Supply in Stephenville, Texas. We ran 8,700 people with no marketing. I'm not performing as Willie's boy. I'm not performing as Eddie Lee. I'm performing as Skinny Cowboy. And because I just thought it was funny because I was in Walmart and I couldn't find a particular spice, and I know women know where they are. And there was a lady standing there at the rack getting spices, reaching everywhere. And I said, "Where is so-and-so?" And she just went like that and handed it to me. And she had a little daughter about 14 years old, scrawny as my arms right there everywhere. And she said, "Mama, he's just flirting with you." And I said, "Well, what if I was, but I wasn't, but I can?" And she said, "See, Mama, I told you." And she said, "Mama, don't pay him any attention. He's skinny as something." And she says, "I'm 14 years old. I'm a cheerleader, and he's skinnier than me." Well, she probably wasn't lying. But anyways, that's where Skinny Cowboy come from. That I just said, well, I just got to own it. I'm just skinny. And so I just did that show. That happened the week before, and I just decided the day I sold the show, I just Tractor Supply gave me a bunch of posters they weren't using for the vinyl posters. They turned them backwards, and I just took spray paint and put Skinny Cowboy performing whatever time and whatever, and the date, July 4th here. And they hung them all over their fences all around the place. And I just spray painting as quick as they'd hang them up. I'd start spray painting Skinny Cowboy. July 4th show, noon till. And anyways, so that day, Ray Wiley Hubbard in Texas is quite famous, and he's actually had, the national and probably worldwide hits. And anyways, so his mom and dad has been my dad's friends for over 40 years, and they had been with Daddy a few days before, and they told Daddy they were going to be in Stephenville, Texas, and Daddy hadn't really said anything to it, but they were stuck in traffic down the road 2.5 miles. Took them 20-something minutes to get from where they were to get to the show because traffic was blocked up for me, small town. And anyways, they came to the gate. They told the boys parking everyone. They said, "We're friends with Willie. Can you park us by the stage?" And everybody in Texas, if you're that old and you say you're friends with Willie, they knew they was talking about Willie Nelson. But what Ray Wiley's in-laws didn't know is that wasn't Willie on the stage, it was me. And so they parked, and were getting their camera stuff, and I was staring. They're straight in front of me, 4 cars, and I was staring right at them when they looked at me, and their jaws kind of dropped, and they looked, and they all looked at each other, and then they started pulling out camera stuff. They sent it to Daddy. 7 seconds into me singing, they stopped the video and said, "Willie, who is that?" And he said, "That's my boy. Where'd you find him?" And then that's where it started. November of that year is when Daddy's people contacted me.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out I had a different dad and a different mom, because I plumb forgot living with my step family. I mean, I was with them since I was 2.5, and I just didn't have the memory at that point.
What kind of a shock was that for you finding that out?
It was a relief.
Mm-hmm.
It was a relief. I mean, me and that family, we are not alike. I mean, we're just so far spread apart that we're just not alike. And I was old enough this time, first time, you know, I'm like 21 years old, and again, you know, I mean, I'm totally convinced anything my step family would tell me is truth. But this time they had been saying stuff. And I'd been told that I was adopted by them this last trip in. After I had the injury, I went back to Texas out of North Carolina for medical in Texas. And they had said it several times that I was adopted. And I said, "Why have y'all always said that?" Because they always said it all my life like a joke, which I was never really adopted. I was just put in that house.
Right.
And so, but anyways, you know, you have that. And then I'm old enough, you get a particular age, I'm 56. I know I look about 17, I can't help it, but anyways, you know, you get some years under your belt, and you be a daddy a few times, and you know, your perception hopefully improves. And so, you know, they told me, the phone call, they said, "You've got a different daddy and a different mama than you're aware of," and that's how they introduced the conversation, told me who they were and whatever. And it went from there, and they said, "You'll never guess in a million years who your daddy is." And I said, "No, I can tell you who my dad is." And they said, "No, you'll never guess." And they had all this to say, and so I waited on them about 5 minutes, and they said, "Well, take a guess." And I said, "Well, it ain't a guess, I'll tell you who my dad is." They said, "Okay." And I said, "Willie Nelson." And I literally heard their truck drive off the road, and I could hear the grass running underneath it, and then hear them stop. And then they had to fumble around to find their phone, and they said, "We ran off the road and had to find the phone." I said, "Yeah, I heard all that." And they said, "How did you know Willie's your dad?" And I said, "Well, he told me." And they weren't aware of that. Daddy didn't remember. And then he remembered, of course, once they told him, you know, but Daddy dotes. And so anyway, you know, and they said, "Do you have any idea who your mama is?" And I said, "No, you're going to have to help me on that one." And they said, "Does Gracie Lee ring a bell with you?" And I said, you know, I've heard that name growing up, but and then after I got off the phone, I remembered the lady that was in and out of my life, but she never was allowed to tell me she was my mom. And I put it together, that's my mom. And then I made some phone calls within the next few days back to San Angelo. And yeah, sure enough, who I remembered, that was my mom. And they caught me up on some stuff. And Daddy was ready to run full tilt with us. And I said, give me some time. I owe it to my mama. And really, I mean, yes, I don't care how old you are, how young you are, you know. But my deal was, I got Daddy. I need to honor my mom. And I did. And I came back between 6 and 9 weeks behind when I told them I was just going to take some time for my mother. And then we rolled on from that point. Yeah.
So what it sounds like to me is, you know, I asked you if it was a shock finding that out, and you said it was more of a relief.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds to me it was that perhaps
well,
for you it was one of those I get it now moments.
No, I understood myself. Because if I compare myself to my step family, it makes no sense.
Right.
If I compare myself to Willie Nelson, oh, I can see that. You know, I mean, I'm not talking physically.
Right.
I'm talking my personality. I've listened to Daddy do an interview so many times, And I've said it out loud. People said, well, can you really follow that? Did that make any sense? And I said, he does exactly how I do. He does it step by step by step. And I said, no, I get it totally. I said, I just get it. I mean, he makes sense to me why he said it that way. And so there was more than that. I had that whole summer with him that I mentioned. But when being older, it made sense.
Right.
I mean, it was just, yeah, he's my dad. And I'd already had the studio where I'd gone to record and then tried to re-record behind it to change my voice, and then I couldn't even release that CD. And so, you got those things that hit you out of the blue that, again, the difference of being on this side of a microphone and a speakers, even though you've got your speakers that play back to you, it's still, it wouldn't register. And possibly I had something stopping me from thinking that way, which to me was just being faithful and honoring Willie Nelson. I believe I said it a while ago, either here or privately. I said, I've never shared that Willie Nelson. I spent that summer with him with 3 people outside of that immediate circle. And the only reason being, most people would have bragged, oh, I hung with Willie Nelson. He thought I was his boy. No, I cared about him. I cared about him. And that was his personal life. And I left it for his private, personal life.
Yeah.
And what people don't understand today, that'll make many judgments, you're listening to my story, but you got to understand in 81, my step family deceived me, separated me from Willie Nelson. It hurt him. Now then, in the current era of things, there's 4 children that claim to be Willie Nelson's children that Willie Nelson's wives had affairs. So they are the reason that they put the thoughts, and they have drove the wedge. They've deceived me about Daddy, and they've deceived Daddy about me. And so now then, Daddy has gone through, again, after we got together, because in 2011 he made the public announcements, which have now been removed from the internet. He made the announcements, me and him touring for the remainder of his life. There's not another child Daddy has ever paid that, you can Google it, their income is $67,000 a year. And Daddy gives them the platinum cards, buys the properties and buys the homes and whatever. But that's he sat their talent, I mean, that's too much for their talent. But they are out working, and that's relative to them working. It's less than minimum wage. Well, what does that say? That says that's his true respect for their talent. Well, I was signed out of Nashville, had my internet, I had my email and my phone conversation agreement for a man who's offered me several million before in contracts, Wayne Hodge out of Nashville, Tennessee. I'll put the name right out there because it's verifiable. I've got the emails. Okay, so anyways, so he had offered me I agreed, he was offering me 2.7, and I said, let's just be done with this deal, and I'll do it for 2.3, clear money a year, for 2 years. Then me and Wayne were probably going to do our own thing, or I'd just do my own thing. I have money to do it. But anyways, so Daddy, for me to come to Daddy, wanted to catch me up with the rest of the kids, what they've accumulated through the year. Said $9 million at the get-go, gave me the timelines on how that worked. Then it was like $14 million within the next year, that total. And then, but my agreement with my dad was $1.78 million a year for the remainder of his career. Well, them other kids, what it says on the internet for their income, $67,000. Well, they all started screaming. They were screaming at me, don't do this, because when you do this, we lose our careers. Well, in any job placement in the world, unless your daddy owns the company, you better be packing the goods or you don't get paid. So Daddy was simply paying me, not what other people said I was worth, but that was me and Daddy. We were doing 3 albums my very first year with him in 2011, no way other than it. We were immediately going to sell my music to different performers to have them, just like with Daddy, which I do have the music, and I've had those offers throughout my life. So that ain't new with my dad. I mean, I've had those offers. If I make a decision, that's my dang decision. So just because I didn't do it, doesn't mean it couldn't have been done and I couldn't verify that I had. Anyways, I got a long history with Nashville. And that's what it just chaps to Nelson. Is not only Nashville, but Daddy's hometown, Austin, Texas. I got the offers. Lucas don't have them. Paula don't have them, Ray Lynn, and Micah. I do. Well, I've got some other business to tend to in this whole family affair. But, no, they've hurt my dad. That's my dad. You think I'm not going to be serious about that? You think I'm not going to take them people down?
It sounds like you're serious about it.
Yeah, I'll take them down. I can. I done doing it. So, but no, they separated me from my dad. That's emotional on my part. That's emotional on my dad's part. My dad right now is living lies that they were able to set up and make appearances appear so. They would tell me, meet your dad at so-and-so. I'd go meet him. He wasn't there, and people say, well, that show's been canceled since. That didn't make no sense to me, because y'all just told me that my dad was going to be here. Well, then they tell Daddy on this side that, well, that Eddie, he's just, and they have their words, I'll say but that's not what they're saying. And they'll say, he's just so arrogant, so full of himself. And so he doesn't care about you. And they tell him, he took that money, and now then he's just whatever. Well, the bottom line is, I've never received a penny of that money. I can tell you whose accounts it's sitting in, but it ain't sitting in mine. And my daddy thinks I'm sitting on $14 million and being a jerk. And think I've done all these things to him. No. His wives and his stepchildren. They're not Nelson DNA. They're stepchildren. They say they're sons and daughters. They're not. And I got to throw this story in. This is hilarious. I have the email on this. Ray Lynn has been outed. Ray Lynn Nelson. She has a daughter named Rachel. Rachel is saying that her mama is not Willie Nelson's child, but she's Willie Nelson's granddaughter. And she says how that is because Eddie and Ray Lynn fooled around. And she's my daughter. These people are nuts. These people are nuts. But that's so she can be on stage and justify her. She says, but she's Willie's grandchild because I'm her daddy. I've said, who's your daddy? And meant it a lot of times. But I ain't that girl's daddy. Okay? I'm not that girl's daddy, nor have I ever had any kind of intimate whatever with Ray Lynn.
It all sounds in a way sort of like a soap opera.
No, it sounds like people that need to be in mental institutions are just allowed to run loose and wild, but it's all true. Like I said, when I say I have an email, I have the email. That's the information that was sent to me, that you have no idea how nutty these people are, and this is what Rachel is saying. Now, I have a daughter named Rachel. Her name's spelled different than Ray Lynn's Rachel. But evidently, she saw that. My daughter's 11 years old. I think this little girl's 19 to 22, somewhere in there. I don't keep up with her. But Rachel Nelson. But she says, no, Willie's her grandpa. She's a Nelson, a real Willie Nelson, because I'm her daddy. But yet they out me and they've separated me, but so they can hang on to a career, they still use me. That's just, okay. Well, moving on.
It's all pretty thought-provoking.
Yeah, it's pretty, it's pretty unusual.
Lady, let me ask you a question, another question. With all of your efforts to set things straight, as you've told us you're trying to do, what is your goal in all of it? And what are you trying to accomplish in the end?
Well, if we just go to the heart sentiments, I have a dad. Any child deserves that, whatever age you are. If your dad loves you and reaches out to you, you have a relationship there. Me and Daddy had back in the 80s. He's aware of what took place then. He finally got me again. This time it was, quotation marks, his own family that broke his heart. I've never, with any form of intent, deceived, defrauded, had even one argument, one thing. Me and Daddy, other than just total grins and love, even when I didn't accept him for my dad, I still loved him for who he was, not for Willie Nelson the star. This is Willie Nelson that's sitting on my couch every weekend he can for that summer of 1981. Okay, that's not star. I wasn't starstruck with him sitting there. I knew 20 artists as big as Daddy at the time out of Nashville, that they were my friends. So there was none of that. It was just, he's a good man. I never told anyone, never till during this situation about that summer with Willie Nelson having his heart broke. So if people will just look at that, my dad deserves his boy. I'm his boy. I was taken from him young. And he has always just referred to me as the boy. That's how Ray Wiley Hubbard's parents, that's with the whole get-go. That's why they knew, because they've heard him talk about the boy. Well, there's somebody standing up on stage that they pulled in thinking it's Willie Nelson. And they done walked up to me and interrupted my show like 5 times during that. And I'd speak to them a little bit. And they said, you ain't never met Willie, you know? And then I told them about that summer. And I said, do not say this publicly to one soul. And I gave a quick thing on it, and I went back to the mic. But I did have some other high school kids for July 4th singing Star Spangled Banner and other things, doing a cappella, so I'd bring them back up and just say, it's time for the national anthem again, or it's time for whatever. And then keep bringing them up so I could talk to these people. I was only being polite, was all I was doing. I'm kind of a polite person. And till I get mad, but then I'm even polite during that time, but you wouldn't know it. I couldn't prove it in a court of law, I was, but I think I am. But anyways, so yeah, I just want Daddy, well, me and Daddy, we should be playing music. We're the two voices.
Well, I would say that's a pretty good answer to my question.
Mm-hmm.
I would think so. I'm going to ask everyone out there watching, you've heard Eddie Lee Nelson talking about his story and about his life and about who his father is. And you really need to look into it and check it out. What I can see from all appearances, if you look at Eddie, you can see something there. You listen to him talk, you can see something there. It seems that too. And if you listen to him sing, I think you'll probably hear some really strong similarities. So it's a good thing to check out. And let me remind you, please subscribe to our channel for Cowboy and the Viking. And make sure you use the email and send us questions. Even send Eddie some questions, because we're going to filter them through to him if you've got questions or comments, and we'll make sure he gets them and answers you. Right now we're going to take a short break. Well, we're back in the Cowboy and the Viking with Eddie Lee Nelson. And as you can see, looking a little different right now, he's holding a guitar. He has kindly agreed to do a song for us to close this show out. And he's shared a lot of stories with us and a lot of information about his life and what he's gone through and about who he is. And we're hoping to have Eddie back on the show again sometime pretty soon and see how things are progressing. But right now, it's my pleasure, and yours and everyone's, to listen to Eddie Lee Nelson.
We'd had a conversation while we were off air, and Jan had asked me, she said, well, how many times have you been married? So I did part of a song. It's called Hell Yeah, I Drink. And anyways, it makes reference to a wife ain't nothing. Somebody's bragging about being good to his wife in the song, and I said, well, wife ain't nothing new to me. Hell, I had 3. So anyways, then just while he was unwrapping the guitar, this is not mine, I can't afford nothing like this. And anyways, I remembered my dad's wife, the mother of them non-Nelson children, and she had said, as if it was some insult, "Well, you never wrote crazy." Well, I really don't know what that really means, that she would say that to me. But evidently, and I know it was a great hit for Daddy, but I mean, she said, "Well, you never wrote crazy." And it was just such an odd thing for her to have said. So that night, I wrote this song. And lately, I go crazy, somewhere past insane. Just the thought or the mention of your name, then I go crazy, right out of my mind, and I'm lost in your world and going crazy in mine. Never been one for sad goodbyes, rather look you in the eye and lie, and walk away from a bad goodbye. And lately I go crazy, right out of my mind, and I'm back in your world and going crazy in mine.
Well, there you have it, everyone. Eddie Lee Nelson, son of Willie Nelson. Thanks so much for sharing that with us, Eddie.
Thank you.
And thank you
I
for
had
being
fun.
on the show.
Thank you very much.
I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you, folks.
We'll see you soon.